dimensions of paths that we talked about earlier. You talk about us unleashing tremendous divine forces embedded in the providential conspiracy around us. What is a providential conspiracy?
Well, basically, it just means this, that God is guiding us in ways that are so subtle, we just can't quite put it all together unless we're looking for God. So in other words, in our own lives, if we kind of think about it, and that's what St. Ignatius wants to do in the spiritual exercise. He's trying to get us to reflect on it, or he's trying to get us to see, okay, so maybe, that guy who mentioned this thing that got me to think this, and then the next day I opened this book and I saw this thing that got me to think this. Then the next day when I tried to take this path and I was completely blocked off, so I had to kind of veer off and take this path. All that stuff fits together like a bunch of subtle jigsaw puzzle pieces, and all of a sudden it forms like a little helping, guiding, directional beacon for me to follow. And then that little thought I had in the back of my mind, that wasn't my subconscious being really, really smart, but maybe kind of a providential, inspiration that sort of says, go that way. And then when I started going that way, I felt a sense of energy and consolation, and maybe that came from God. Well, it's like subtle piece 1 with subtle piece 2 with subtle piece 3 with subtle piece 4 with subtle piece 5, and you put it all together, though, and you look at it in retrospect, right? And that's the important thing. In retrospect, you go, God really guided me. That was really great. But then, of course, when you're looking forward, you're still in the maze, and you're still in the haze. So because of that, you're sort of trying to look at it. But if you start kind of following where the little beacon seems to be leading, where that little glimmer of light is, if you're open to seeing the glimmer of light, that's what Jesus wants, right? He wants you to be open to it, to be looking for it. If you're looking for that little beacon of light, honestly, if you are open to God's guiding path, then the subtle little pieces come together. If you're praying to the Lord for guidance, the subtle little pieces will come together. And then all of a sudden you go, how did I get to this place right here? I was back doing this over here in T sub 1, and now in T sub 3, I'm doing this other thing sort of off the path, but nevertheless much better. How did that happen? And then you start looking backwards and you go, this and this and this. Oh, you're so sly, Lord. Oh, you're very subtle indeed. Oh, I see what you're doing over here. And of course, I do. That's just, sometimes I'm in the chapel and I finally look retrospectively and I go, oh my goodness, Lord, I see what you're up to. Thank you very, very much. I'm glad I'm over here and not over there. So, but I do see it, and I kind of appreciate it in my little way, and I sometimes actually say it like that. I get you now. I'm with you now. I get it, and thank you very much. And so that's my little prayer. But he is subtle, and he has to be subtle to help us maintain our freedom. But at the same time, the beacon's there. If we're looking, if we're trying to follow, if we're asking him for guidance, don't worry, he will provide it.
Now you also say here, the more we progress on our path, the more we'll be able to help others on their own path of salvation. How so?
Well, again, as St. Teresa of Avila says in that wonderful Interior Castle, right? If you haven't had an experience of these things, you're probably not going to be able to experience to know what I'm talking about precisely. It'll only be hazy to you. And if you only have a hazy understanding of what I'm trying to say, you shouldn't be teaching this to anybody. Alternatively, if you do have the experience, and then you've turned around and you get it, you've tried to understand what happened in that experience and how God was guiding you, you're probably going to have a lot of good spiritual wisdom, and you'll probably be a very good spiritual guide. So in other words, the idea would be, it's not just the experience. You have to reflect on the experience in the light of the teaching of Jesus as interpreted by the church. And if you do that, if you're looking for that light of Jesus interpreted by the church, you reflect on that experience, that spiritual experience you've had. I'm telling you, you get a wisdom from it. And that wisdom can really help you to help others. And boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing like wisdom. And there's always a lot of people who really do, think that they have a lot of experience, but they haven't reflected on it. That's a problem, because then the experience, if you don't quite know what to make of it, it's not quite wisdom yet. It's not quite the tempered knowledge yet. And similarly, if you have no experience, religious experience at all, I mean, I can't see how people who do not pray can want to teach people how to pray or make suggestions, to people on how to pray. And so the first thing to want to find out if somebody wants to be a spiritual director or say something is find out how much they pray. And when they pray, do they know who they're really praying to? The deity that is before them, that is adorable and beautiful and truth-filled and good to the core, that you're there with them. And if there is that reverential awareness, and that there is that movement from vocal prayer to mental prayer, and there is that contemplation that's there, okay, all right, now we're in a position, because people like that are on the road to conversion. And if they're on the road to conversion, as St. Ignatius would say, the first thing, of course, is stop the mortal sins. And the next passage, stop the venial sins. And if they're on that road to conversion, and they're basically trying to follow as best they can, that wisdom, they're probably going to be a pretty good spiritual guide for you. And so, but you really do want people who are on the road to conversion and who really do pray. A lot of people have a lot of suggestions and a lot of devotions, and those devotions and suggestions can be very, very good, and they can be within God's providence. But again, you want people who are praying and people who are on the road to conversion. Right. That's your best bet.
Well, let me ask you, you got the church